What a game. For the second week in a row, our Sanders played some electric football, and today we're going to go through it. In case you don't know, my name's Woody. Jake's got me on to discuss some of the standout stats each week. So let's go over this week's drubbing of the Tigers. People have been critical of Ross Lyon's teams historically for lacking firepower, and there's perhaps some truth to that, as this week's win over Richmond was just the 8th time a team he's coached has scored 135 or more points. But let's look at our more recent history. Since just before our bye, in round 14 last year, 5 out of the last 13 matches, we've scored over 100 points, and there were 2 matches where we fell just short, scoring 98 and 99. If we were to say last year's round 18 and 21 losses to Adelaide and Brisbane, where we scored 39 points in both matches, were anomalies and exclude them from the data, we would have an average of 96.18 points per match, making us the 4th highest scoring team in this period behind only Geelong, Hawthorn and Adelaide. So how did we get our biggest winning margin since round 14 2015 when we beat the Bombers by 110 points? Well, some of you might like this answer and some of you might not. When looking at our stats, the only increase I saw above the 10 to 15% area, where many of our stats for the day lay, was marks inside 50, which increased by over 36% from 15.4 over the last 10 matches to 21 against the Tigers. Personally, I think this is a sign of how we want to play and how we want to address the connection inside 50 issues we identified last year. We currently lead the league for marks over the last 10 games and are second for uncontested possessions. We have the 4th highest kick to handball ratio while sitting middle of the pack for handball receives and 3rd last for contested marks. And in my mind, this points to our coaches asking our players to move up the ground via short marks to a player running into space. Essentially using the running and kicking skills we've drafted for over the last few years. But let's get into some of the individual performances. Captain Jack Steele was out just before the match with knee soreness, but you would have hardly noticed considering we won the overall clearances by 5, only losing centre clearances by 2, and all of that was achieved despite losing the hitouts 28 to 42. So let's take a moment to go over some players who got opportunities in the guts this weekend and what they did with that chance. Starting with new recruit Jack Macrae, who for the first time this year might not be going home as our best on ground. He did still have a day out with 31 disposals, 17 pressure acts, 12 score involvements, 11 ground ball gets, 9 clearances, and 2 of those were centre clearances. Before I get on to the rest of the mids, I probably should mention who I think was best on ground, and it's hard to go past Jack Sinclair. With a career high of 40 disposals with 10 score involvements, 8 pressure acts, 8 rebound 50s, 6 inside 50s, and all without attending any centre bounces, he looked back to his All-Australian form. But without Steele and with no assistance from Sinclair, we got to see some of our youngsters get more time in the guts, and I want to focus in on Hugo Garcia. In only his 6th full match, attending 58% of centre bounces, Garcia got career highs for disposals with 23, clearances with 6, marks with 5, and equaled his tackling record with a game high of 9. So I want to zoom in on some of his efforts and highlight what I think he did well. In his second tackle, 8 minutes into the first quarter I might add, Keeler loses the forward 50 throw-in and the ball ends up getting to Jack Ross. Hugo is going the wrong way but adjusts and moves the laterally so quickly that he's able to pin the arm and drag him down for a free. While he does miss the shot for his first of 2 behinds, that kick brings him to 5 disposals, equaling the highest disposal getter at the time, Jaden Short. Here, it's early in the third. Garcia has continued his hot start with 14 disposals, 5 marks and tackles, and 4 stoppage clearances, and he's about to get his 5th. Vlosten intercepts a rebound 50 and his spoil sends the ball about 30 metres forward. Side note, could you imagine if Keeler could learn to do that in the ruck? Anyway, Treasy gets the ball at the Richmond 50-metre line and is immediately set upon by Garcia, but that's not even what I wanted to highlight. It's his efforts in the next ruck contest where he pushes off his opponent, gathers the hit out, breaks away from the contest and hits Wood 40 metres down the line, who unfortunately couldn't complete the mark. But this is the Garcia I've been talking up all off-season. His per-minute output last year had him as one of our best high-pressure players who also had huge offensive upside.
Huge upside potential with very little downside risk.
And should he be able to do that for a full match, I have no doubt that he can be one of our more important players going forward. Speaking of important players for our future, Toby Travalia played his first match and he got 18 disposals with 11 contested possessions and 9 ground ball gets, both of which were only behind Jack Macrae. He also attended 4 centre bounces, but he did look more settled on the wing. Before we get on to the next player's efforts that I'd like to highlight, I want to make sure we have 2 abbreviations in our AFL vocabulary so I don't have to keep saying the entire phrases going forward. Essentially, I'm not the biggest fan of disposal efficiency. I'm working on a video going over all the reasons why that is and some simple alternative options. I've already mentioned disposals per turnover in previous videos. It's a fairly common term these days, and considering how often it'll come up, I'll be using DPTO going forward. Likewise, I also like to use score involvement per disposal percentage, or SIPD percent, which I think is an interesting measurement, particularly as you get closer to the goals. With all that said, I want to talk about Max Hall. Last week, Max again kicked 2 goals and gathered 18 disposals with 9 score involvements, meaning he had an SIPD of 50%, which was equal 6th best behind only Owens, Sharman, Higo, Collard and Hasty. And Max Hall got more disposals than all of them. He is also our 9th overall for score involvements for the season and 11th overall in our SIPD percentage. And when we look at the league as a whole, he comes in 72nd amongst players who have played 3 or more matches. So clearly he's playing well, and honestly, so is the majority of our forward line right now. So when we have the likes of Dan Butler, Liam Henry, and maybe even Mateus spend some time up forward while he's getting back to full health, how we fit them all is becoming an increasingly complex question, but a good one. Finally, like I'm sure you've heard many say before, I want to give a big thank you to everybody that came down for Matty's match or has had any involvement with Matty's match over the years. Otherwise, that about sums up my major points for the week. If you want to see more of my face, I've got my own channel at Wooden Spoon Data, but I'll be here every week to go over some of the standout Saints stats. I want to thank Jake for having me, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Go Saints!